welcome everybody to our 21st Accounting History SIG of BAFA webinar. And today we're looking at, what are we looking at? We are looking at accounting history and the organisation of coerced work. And we have three excellent presenters here today. First, we have Adriana Silva, who is going to present on the narratives of exploitation and resistance, European immigration, business and accounting on Ibicaba farm in the 19th century. Can't get my words today. So over to Adriana.
So thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen. So, I think I'm shared. It's okay. My screen.
That's great. Thank you, Adriana.
Great. Let's start. So, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to present this research today here with you. So, Karen, thank you for the invitation. This paper was recently published in Business History last month, more precisely, and it is a collaborative study developed with Karen. So our collaboration, I think it's important to say that our collaboration started through the BAFA mentoring program, which brought us together. And I am very grateful for this opportunity, and especially for Karen's guidance and insights throughout the development of this research. So, in this paper, we explore the relationship between European immigration, business practices, and accounting at Ibicaba farming, and that in 9th century Brazil. This study, I think, so to understand this case, let me briefly introduce the historical context. During the mid-9th century, Brazil was undergoing a major transformation in its labor system. Slave labor had long been the foundation of the colonial economy. However, it was increasingly becoming incompatible with the demands of a modernizing capitalist economy that required great labor flexibility and productivity. An important turning point occurred in 1850, around 1850, when the Eusébio de Queiroz law ended the transatlantic slave trade. At the same time, the land law restricted access to land, limited the autonomy of former slavers and poorer rural populations. Together with the commercial code, these reforms reflected Brazil's attempt to align its institutions with emerging global capitalist markets. However, and this was important, the transition away from slavery was not designed to create a fully free labor market. Instead, it was structured to maintain a cheap and dependent workforce, which largely benefited large landowners. At the same time, international demand for coffee was expanding rapidly, especially from Europe and the United States. This led to a significant expansion of coffee cultivation in Brazil, and coffee production required a large and permanent labor workforce. As a result, landowners increasingly turned to European immigration as an alternative labor source. With this context in mind, our research examines how business practices reinforce and continue imperial colonial power relations, and how counter narratives can challenge these practices. To guide our analysis, we developed two main research questions. The first one asks, how did account practices reflect and reinforce racial and economic hierarchies inherited from the colonial period? And in this question allows us to analyze account as a mechanism of governance, structuring labor relations and reinforcing economic dependence. And the second question asks, how have immigrants and narratives and accounts challenged the official accounting practices, exposing work conditions and exploitation? This question directs our attention to form of resistance and counter narratives that contest dominant institutional accounts. Together, these questions frame our analysis at Become a Farm as a historical case study, allowing us to connect specific historical practices to broader debates on coloniality of power and the politics of accounting. So, why is this research important? First, it addresses an important gap in business historiography. While the exploitation of enslaved populations has received considerable some scholarly attention, the experiences of European immigrants, settlers in Brazil remain relatively unexplored. Although these migrants were formally classified as free laborers, men were inserted into systems characterized by debt, surveillance, and restricted mobility. Second, the study introduces a novel theoretical perspective or different theoretical perspective, combining the concept of coloniality of power with the literature on counter accounting. This allows us to analyze account as both a site of power and a potential site of resistance as well. Third, the paper proposes an important reinterpretation. Instead of viewing the transition from slavery to immigrant labor as a process of progress or modernization, we interpret it as a continuation of colonial mechanisms of control. Finally, our finds also have contemporary relevance because it highlights the importance of transparency and accountability in current debates on migrant labor's governance. Let us now turn to our case study. Ibicaba Farm. Ibicaba was owned by a senator, by Senator Nicolau Vergueiro, and he was an influential plantation owner in western São Paulo, Brazil. And during the 9th century, the farm underwent two important transitions. First, it shifted from sugarcane production to coffee cultivation. Secondly, it gradually moved from slave labor to immigrant contractual labor. In response to growing international pressure to end the slave trade, Vergueiro created a company, called Vergueiro and Cia in 1846, especially to recruit and finance the transport of European immigrants. In 1847, six of four settlers families arrived under this scheme, and the goal was for immigrant labor to complement and eventually replace enslaved workers. And because of this, Ibicaba became an important experimental site for new laborers arrangements during Brazil's transition away from slavery. At Ibicaba, labor relations were organized through what was known as the partnership system. Under this arrangement, European immigrants, here in this case, mainly Swiss and German, signed contracts with the landowner. The landowner covered the cost of transportation from Europe, provided housing and allocated coffee trees to the settlers. In return, the profits from the harvest were divided equally between the landowner and settler. At first glance, this arrangement appeared progressive. However, it was not, because in practice, it produced strong forms of economic dependence and several mechanisms. It was possible to observe that several mechanisms contributed to this. So, for example, settlers had no purchase goods for the state's story. Prices were often inflated. Access to external markets was restricted. And as a result, settlers frequently accumulated large debts. Surveillance also played an important role here. The spatial organization on the plantation allowed overseas to visually monitor workers. Settlers needed written permission to leave the farm and communication with outsiders, and was often restricted as well. And these mechanisms blurred the boundary between free labor and coercion. To analyze this system, we draw on Aníbal Quijano's concept of coloniality of power. Quijano argues that colonial power structures do not disappear after colonial rule formally ends. Instead, they adapt and persist in the time, shaping social and economic hierarchies in new days. In the case of 19th century Brazil, the transition from slavery to immigrant labor did not eliminate systems of domination. Rather, those systems were reconfigured through economic and bureaucratic mechanisms. That contracts and account practices became a key instruments of control. Even though the immigrants are white Europeans. They were still positioned within a hierarchy that placed the landowners at the top. And this illustrates how colonial logics of domination could operate through economic dependence rather than direct force. Alongside coloniality of power, we also draw of the concept of counter-accounting. In critical account literature, counter-account refers to practices that challenge dominant representations produced by official account systems. Traditional account often reduces individuals to categories such as assets, liabilities, or debtors. Counter-account, by contrast, introduces alternative narratives that reveal the social and the ethical consequences of those systems. In our historical case, counter-account appears through the testimony of through the memories of Thomas Davids. Thomas Davids was a Swiss immigrant who worked at Ibicava. Davids later published a memoir describing the exploitative labor conditions on the plantation, and his narrative challenges the official portrayal of immigrant labor as free and mutually beneficial. Methodologically, our study adopts a critical historiographical and narrative approach. This approach reflects the decolonial commitment to recovering voices that have often been marginalized in official business records. Our analysis combines two strategies. First, historical analysis, which situates account practices within a broader social and economic structure of the time. And second, a narrative inquiry, which focuses on individual experiences and testimonies. Yeah. By combining these perspectives, we can analyze accounts not only as a technical system, but also as a social practice embedded in power relations. And our analysis is based on two main primary sources. Primary source. The first one is a Master Book 5. This book was an account ledger from Ibicaba Farm archives, covering the period between 1862 and 1872, a period of 10 years here. This document records detailed financial transactions related to immigrant workers. And our second source is the memoir written by Thomas Davids. Although Davids worked on the farm earlier, when we compare with the Master Book 5, his narrative provides a detailed description of labor conditions and accounting practices. By compare these two sources, we were able to verify that the practices he described were not isolated events, but part of a broader and persistent system. Our first major find concerns account as a mechanism of control. At Bicaba, immigration was not simply a demographic process, it was a financial operation. Immigrants were expected to repay the cost of their transportation through Europe. as well as other expenses like food, health, accommodation. As a result, many settlers became trapped in cycles of debt. For example, one account recorded in the ledgers was that despite regular work and coffee production, a settler ended the year with a large financial deficit. Interest charges alone consumed a large portion of the value of his harvest. In fact, for every unit of income he earned, more than 10 units were added to his debt. In the ledgers, it's possible to observe as well. Around 90% of settlers appear in similar conditions of permanent indebtedness. Regarding our second finding, this finding highlights how debt, surveillance, and dependence operated together. That functioned as a powerful governance mechanisms. Although their works were not legally enslaved, the accumulation of debt limited their autonomy in ways that resembled earlier systems of domination. Surveillance reinforced this structure. And the plantation layout allowed overseas the monitor productivity, administrative roles, restricted works, mobility, and communication as well. Together, these mechanisms create a closed system of labor, credit and consumption, where workers had very limited opportunities to escape economic dependence. Our third finding concerns counter narratives and resistance. Thomas David's testimony can be interpreted as a form of counter accounting. Through his narrative, he exposed manipulative account practices and criticized the lack of transparency in the partnership system. His actions eventually contribute to the revolt of the partners in 1856, when immigrant workers protested against the conditions on the farm. And although the revolt did not lead the immediate structural change, David's testimony gained international attention. It also contributed to political pressure on immigrant policies in Europe. In this sense, his narrative demonstrates how subaltern actors can challenge dominant economic representations and create space of resistance. To conclude, our study demonstrates that at become a farm, account practices played a central role in structuring labor relations and reinforce economic dependence, rather than represent a complete break with slavery. The partnership system reproduced colonial forms of dominance through new economic mechanisms. At the same time, counter narratives, such as David's testimony, reveal that account can also become a site of resistance. So I think it's important to highlight that the memoir constructed by David based on accounting information. More broadly, our study contributes to the colonial perspectives in accounting and business history, highlighting how historical partners of exploitation may continue to shape contemporary forms of migrant labor governance. So, thank you very much. I conclude my presentation here, and thank you for your attention. And I will be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Adriana. It was an absolute pleasure working with you on this paper. Any questions, anybody? No, I can't.
Well, maybe, Karen, would I start? And
Please.
it's not so much a question as a comment. And I'll just start by saying Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. And it is a bank holiday today in Ireland, but I wanted to attend this seminar because it is incredibly relevant to work myself and Sean Power are doing on how the British South Africa Company used taxation to coerce the natives. And I find your context just very interestingly different, but strangely the same. You know, so the labour was being coerced from European settlers, not from the natives. And then, I mean, myself and Sean are nearly finished the paper, but I've already made 3 changes to it on this morning. But I think things that are very interesting in your paper are the spatial surveillance, the way in which they used debt to coerce or force the labour. And I noticed that you used the two terms. We've been flip-flopping about that as well, but we're sticking with coercion because theoretically the natives didn't actually have to offer their labour, but they really did. But the taxation was used to create a debt obligation. So there's no question in this. It's just congratulations on a really interesting piece of work and a lovely publication. So well done to both of you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Neve. And it really, the parallels are really interesting. Sebastian.
Yes, thank you very much for these insights here and seeing sharecropping agreements in a very different context from what we know in Europe, particularly Southern Europe with Italy, France, Spain, and here seems to me an interesting case to see how the system was invented, adapted in a way to kind of substitute slavery in a sense, one form of slavery with another form of slavery. And just a curiosity, Adriana, if you know, what was the state of the legal framework, the legislation around this by the state? Because I would suppose that the state, the country as a state of Brazil, would need to also create legislation in order to enable this, or at least not to prevent exploitative contracts of that sort. Because I mean, it clearly seems very excessive what you were describing. It was particularly impressive when you said, "Well, look, they actually work and make a profit, but for every unit of profit they make, they were also given more 10 times worth of debt for this." So. Can you share some insights on what the legal ideological situation on the country level was at the time?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying to explain. So that there were a legal process behind this. Controlled by the government as well. So as I said, Vergueiro was a senator, and he received um, some I forgot the word. So some incentive to receive immigrants, and he got the control. So that period the state, the government, Brazilian government, did not a great control regarding slavery or immigrants from Europe. Yeah, there were, but was not a great control. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I can explain more or these answer your question.
So what you're saying, what I understand is the government and the parliament at the time were also okay with these practices, did not do anything against, and let them go in a way to say, well, look, it solves some of our labor market problems, in a sense.
No, there not. I didn't observe this in our data or during that I was. We are doing our research, so there is no problem. There was problem with in the in other governments. So, for example, when international governments knows about the situation. Prussia, for example, prohibit or didn't do new contracts with Brazil, but internal there is no changes.
So what was really interesting was that at this time there were economic crises in the European countries where the immigrants were moving to Brazil. So these were people that needed jobs, that there was arrangements between the countries for people to come to Brazil to work in the plantations. But after David's protests and the riots, certainly Switzerland and some of the other countries, because he came from Switzerland, certainly Switzerland and some of the other countries set up political barriers and legislations to prevent people from being exploited and more people from going to Brazil. So although there wasn't the legislation on the ground in the place at the time, because I guess they probably hadn't caught on to this happening, certainly as there was awareness, as awareness was raised, there became legislative things that prevented it happening further, but more in the countries where the people were coming from.
Thank you, Karen.
I think we've got just a couple of minutes. If people want to just grab a quick refresh on their coffees. I'm not missing any hands up to ask questions, am I? Thank you so much, Adriana.
So thank you
for
the opportunity.
Rearranging your teaching.
Yeah, I have to go, so I'm sorry. I'm not available to watch the other presentations, so I have to leave you. Bye bye. Good presentations.
Welcome back. Now we have a presentation by Sebastian Hoffmann called Feeding Children or Cannons, Performance Reported in Navy Boy Asylums. And this is a joint piece of work with Michela Magliacani and Paolo Andrei.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Karen, for inviting us to present our work on Navy boy asylums in Italy. Paolo today is here as well. Michaela is caught in teaching commitments this morning still, so happy to take the presentation here and share with you some insights on a very particular form of Navy asylums that were operated in Italy at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. And how we become aware of this particular form of asylums. Michaela attended a while ago a presentation of a book that two former admirals of the Italian Navy had written, the admirals Grienti and Merlini, on these asylums in Italian called navi asilo. And they were at the time quite popular and became quite well known in particularly between 1940 and 1928, when they were further integrated into a bigger charity. And were at that time seen as the Montessori of the sea, and also, as you can see from a contemporary testimony, quite impressive to the people and to the educators of the time, where there was written here a witness report saying, well, look, I'm on the Caracciolo asylum ship, so one of the asylums that were operated, and seeing there the boys that were living humble, magnificent lives of sailors. It's very moving to every human and Italian heart, educated on board of the ship by retired and active officers of our Navy who possess all the traditions and all the will to pass them on. There will emerge beautiful, healthy, honest, educated young men who will go on warships, on merchant ships, who perhaps will become fishermen, but all of whom the Caracciolo will have given the basis for making a life and the more conscious of good citizens and soldiers. So this was really the idea of the asylums there, to say, look, what we do is we provide boys in need, young boys in need, children, first of all, the opportunity to grow up in a protected environment with proper education, and at the same time prepare them for maritime service of any form. And studying these types of asylums, we propose to contribute to a number of debates in the accounting history literature, is to how accounting and systems of accounting are related to the stigmatization of vulnerable social groups. We're talking about young boys, often from disadvantaged families, orphans, but also boys with problematic behaviors, and how accounting can then be used to also legitimize disciplining measures of social behavior in confined educative spaces. We're also, given that we're looking here at Navy institutions or institutions close to the Navy, around the period we look at around the First World War as well, and also speaking to accounting in context of social tensions and armed conflicts. So you see a bit of the political nature of accounting there as well, and also how costing, budgeting, disclosure, and financing practice reporting are used by, are relating to the needs of the armed forces. And as such, we try to map out the intersection in between accounting history studies in relation to institutions of social care and the military, because we have both perspectives here that were yet discussed in the literature rather separately, in order to understand how accounting can become an instrument of military and public policy and war, and to explore how performance reporting systems that we found in these Navy asylums enable governments to also monitor the effectiveness of public policies and public programs. So what were these Navy boy asylums? They started in the 1880s with the so-called Nave Officina Retenzione Garaventa in Genoa. There, a former a teacher tried to set up a specific school for said disadvantaged boys, relating to or with a particular emphasis on maritime sailors education as well, because he said this is something that we need, that is useful. And very soon the Italian Navy became aware of this educational initiative and saw an opportunity to engage and to also exploit these attempts, such that they then also gave a ship, a former Navy ship, to this school, such that they could grow and set up additional schools of that type, this kind of Navy schools in an asylum type in Venice and later on in Naples. And then in 1914, and this is where these initiatives became institutionalized, and when the state kind of sought to take more control of these educational institutions, the Italian Parliament implemented a charity type of organization called National Patronage Organization for the Navi Asilo, so for the Navy boy asylums, in order to bring all of them under one umbrella and to control and organize them more centrally. And what we're studying is actually the initial period of this charity, this Opera Nazionale, which was formed as a moral entity, so a charity of the Ministry of the Italian Navy, with a very clear objective to support the foundation and development of the Navi Asilo by providing direct subsidies to coordinate through appropriate agreements the charitable work, also in collaboration with other public and private institutions that have similar goals. So really take more control to have coordinated efforts in regards of the Navi Asilo. The president of the organization, here you see also the political significance and influence already, was the Minister of the Navy, so high-end political government representative, or a representative he chose to send on his behalf. On the board of directors, you had a number of ministry delegates. The Ministry of the Interior was involved, the Ministry of Education, then the legal representatives, one legal representative from every Navy asylum. And the Minister of the Navy could also appoint extraordinary members as he deemed fit and necessary in order to have certain expertises or certain skills on this board of directors. And what you see in the budget figures here is that while the charity, the opera, took off relatively small, 1940-50, with only 10,000 lira, was an immense growth projected immediately after, evidencing that the state really wanted to make an investment in this type of Navy maritime-oriented education. And what we are studying as the primary source here is this opera, so the charity's first activity report for the year prepared for the year 1950, 1960. And this report was prepared by Levi Morenos, who was an extraordinary member on the board of the opera, implemented by the Minister of the Navy, and in charge of overseeing as a sort of commercial director as well, also the finances. And he took the job of providing this first activity report. And it said it contained was structured in five chapters along the main activities really of the organization, starting with a chapter on fundraising. We're describing of how beyond the state's budget they were able to secure additional significant financial contributions. how they were going about the setup of new Navi asilos in other cities and other coastal cities. And he is describing there how they were making also choices in terms of various proposals they received from different cities, and that in the end they were able to set up one new Navi asilo, the one of the Mediterranean Sea, as the one that was financially most sustainable and that they could support. They then elaborate on the subsidies to the existing Navi asilo, the Scilla and the Caracciolo, and detailing the specific budgets for exactly the 28 standard places on the Caracciolo, 24 in the Scilla. We're also describing how Navy personnel was allocated from their bases, from their operations to the Caracciolo to provide first-hand expertise education there. Fourth section then talks about the coordination of activities with other institutions. The most notable one they mentioned there is the case of the Vittorio Emanuele III Maritime Orphanage in Anzio, and this was an orphanage for kids, for very, very young boys that ran into some financial troubles as well, and was included in the opera's activities, was supported by the opera as well, because the idea there was to say, well, look, we can turn this into even a pre-Navy institution, so kind of kindergarten. A Navy kindergarten that could then, from where the boys could be transferred to the Navi Asilo for further education. So it was a way to move the entire educational chain even to a younger age.
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Question? Can do in between. No. Okay. And then they also had a specific section on extra subsidies for orphan boys of those Navy sailors who lost their life at sea during wartime service. And there you see the impact of the First World War already, because the charity was also tasked to take particular care of orphans from officers who died in service, and they were saying that there were a total of 155 of these boys on the two ships and in the young kids orphanage. What is most interesting from an accounting point of view is then the appendices to this report, because these appendices come in three main forms in a type of structured performance reporting, as we interpret it. First one is the one you see on the left-hand side, which is a type of inventory on the boys that were here on the Navi Asilo Scilla between 1940 and 1950, and you see it's very well structured. This inventory, a nice listing with the serial number, the surname, the first name, place of birth, the age, the type of the typology of the boy in there. So if it was an orphan, if so, from which side of the family, or if the parents were still alive. And the boy was there for reasons of bad behavior, that the parents said you need to go there in order to get a proper education, because we can't deal with you and the problems anymore. So very nicely listed here, categorized, typified, as we would do for an inventory as well. And this said to us looks similar to what you will also expect to see in a manufacturing business, to document here how the asylum is taking care of vulnerable boys, and of which types of vulnerable boys they are taking care. And thus we interpret this as an accountability report that shows how social value is created by the charity, saying, look, this is the inventory, the portfolio of boys we are taking care of with these specific characteristics where they come from, and this is how we help society in the end. Following that, the next appendix, the next performance report you see is what we call deployment performance reports, which narrate, you see it's no longer a list, it's highly narrative here, where you see testimonies by commanding officers of former boys who were in the Navy asylum, who then went on deployment on foremost here civil ships, and then you see here il comandante, so the captain of the respective ship, then is writing a little paragraph on how well the former graduate has been doing, and is commanding here, saying, yes, the education in the Navy Asilo was very useful, and they are now doing a very good job on our ship under my command. And these testimonies, individually handwritten in the original, as a letter coming in, demonstrate now also to the public how value is created also after taking socially care of the boys, meaning how they make a contribution as effective and hardworking sailors, thereby creating now also public value here. As I said, in a civil way, as these are merchant and fishermen ships largely. And performance reporting type number 3 in another appendix then are military performance reports, particularly prominent here at this time, with the outbreak of the First World War. And these are then individual testimonies written for, or reports written for individuals with the name as the headline, the name of the former asylum boy as the headline, and then narrating particular primarily military maritime achievements during service on warships. Or there's also a story in here, a short story, where one boy could not go on a military service ship. He wanted to, but because of a disability, was not allowed to. But made excellent contributions and rescued his commanding officer after an accident on the ship. So demonstrating here that the education on the ships not only useful for civil maritime purpose, but also for military naval aspirations. And thus these narratives explain, demonstrate, are supposed to evidence how the charity is also creating military public value, supporting the state, thus in many ways. And this is how we try to conceptualize, in a sense, how we try to theorize this accounting system that we see in this particular type of charity, where it's about public policy-wise value for money creation, because they receive, you've seen, money from the state, money from private donations. They do then a type of inventory accounting to say, look, this is how we use this money to create social value by taking care of disadvantaged young boys. And then we use a type of narrative performance reporting in 2 ways, deployment military, in order to demonstrate and show how we, beyond the social value, after social value creation, also create further public value long-term outside our organization, when these well-educated, immediately useful young men are making important contributions to the maritime activities of the country. And with this, we propose is that we also shed a different light on some of the conversations we've seen in the accounting history literature in particular, but accounting literature more general, I argue, how accounting is used to dehumanize human beings. And Steve Walker, Lisa Evans, Warwick Funnell have made notable contributions there and demonstrated how accounting is used to dehumanize. We now show that here, nonetheless, we see a bit of this too when these boys are put into inventories, just as a list with certain categories. But, and now comes the big but after, when they prove their public value, they are rehumanized. They become individuals. They are taken out of the anonymous mass in the box, and their names become headlines of the success stories. And this rehumanization once public value has been proven, and this is what we hope to add as a new perspective to accounting for human beings in the context, as I said, of social institutions and the military here in this very specific setting. With this, thank you very much, and I look forward to some questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. It's absolutely fascinating, and I actually see many parallels with, so in the UK, there were charity boys that were funded by to go to the Royal Hospital schools in Greenwich from 1712, actually. And what was quite interesting about them is they were taught many skills, so maths, English, Latin, various languages, including Italian-style accounting. So I don't know if you noticed any Italian-style accounting being taught to your boys. Or
Yeah, this is very very interesting also, because I did not mention, but inspiration for this type of Navy boy assignments also came from the Royal Navy in the UK, who was operating similar institutions a bit before, and this is what inspired then the Italian Navy to say, look, we have a teacher there in Genoa who's doing something like this. Let's use this as a starting point. We've seen the Brits can do this successfully too, so it will be useful for us as well. And even though also the education here was quite broad, but I think we've not come across the double entry bookkeeping technique here, which said I think was for the type of sailors that they had in mind, not the primary focus in terms of skills, beyond the moral and human education. But when it then came to skills, they were, I think, focusing more on the practical sailor skills.
I find it absolutely fascinating that whilst the Royal Navies were all at war with each other, they actually shared a lot of their ways of doing things and learnt from each other both ways. Absolutely fascinating. Christopher.
Yes, I was actually going to raise the experience in Britain. When I was growing up, one of our neighbours had served in the Merchant Navy, but before then, his adolescence he spent on the training ship Arethusa, which is one of these training ships, basically the equivalent of what you were talking about. Unfortunately, he hated it. He'd been very unhappy, and I think it affected him all the way through his life. But that's just one individual. I've just been very quickly on while you've been talking on the internet, and I see that the records of these training ships are available in the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. So there may be an opportunity for a comparative international accounting history study there. And the other thing I wanted to mention, you may already have come across this, but last week a book was published, and the title of the book was The Gospel of Work and Money, Industrial Education and Its Global Legacies. And one of the chapters in that book is a discussion of the British training ships, and so it may be worth giving that a quick glance to see you can use any material from that. I'll put the title into the chat.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. No, I've not yet seen this book. So very useful. You spotted this fast. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Julia. You're mute, Julia.
Oh, sorry, my sound just went in that exact second when you said Julia. That's why I didn't switch my. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. Thank you very much for presenting it, and particularly in like what Christopher was saying in terms of a person that he knew had been through a similar program who'd had perhaps negative experiences. You know, on a personal level, you know, there are obviously lots of young people on ships. Some would have a positive experience, formative for their life. Others might find it quite shocking or frightening to be on their own on a Navy ship and learning in that sense. I was really interested in your point on the idea of rehumanizing and sharing of stories once people had gone through the system. Did you get any sense as to whether this was in some way propagandistic or selective, only presenting the positive successes, or was it more sort of wide open than that?
No, the thing is, our sense was not that this was colored by ideology of any type, but driven certainly by the interest of the charity to say, look, these are our success stories. In a sense, to say, look, we are worth the money you're giving us, and we probably deserve to have more. Yeah. In this sense, because we're doing really good and we're creating much more value than the 10, 20, 60,000, 100,000 lira you're giving us. Even though, of course, they do not measure, and they cannot measure this in the end in monetary values. But this is why they're trying to say we gather, and this also the charity was also actively trying to pursue and follow the careers of the boys they had, and then write also to the commanders of the ships they were on and was saying, can you provide a testimony? Yeah, how are they doing? Send us something, a short review in a sense, or a short paragraph, or an episode, or whatever, so that they could include this in their activity report as a sort of accountability document as well. But instead, we get the sense that this was not primarily retrospective to say, yeah, it's an account of the past that we have, but it was more to say, look, we've already demonstrated, now we can do more.
Okay, sort of ongoing safeguarding,
Yes,
monitoring,
yes,
amplification of those who came
so.
from humble origins in their stories. Thank you so much for explaining that,
No,
Sebastian.
thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, and welcome back for our third and final presentation. Last but not least, we have Thomas Herman, who will talk to us about accountability for the redemption of slaves, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, the Tritarians, and the Austrian Habsburgs in the early modern period. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed. Hopefully you see my slides.
We do.
Okay. Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm here to talk to you about accounting for the redemption of slaves, the Trinitarians in the Austrian Habsburg monarchy. Something about, the historical context. Continuous warfare characterized relations between the Austrian Habsburg monarchy and the Ottoman Empire until the mid-18th century. The consequences of the Great Turkish War included the devastation of Western Hungary and Eastern Lower Austria by Ottoman forces and their Tatar auxiliaries. Also, in the further Austro-Ottoman conflicts, both sides captured large numbers of prisoners during these campaigns. Even in periods formerly regarded as peace, conditions along the frontier remained unstable. Thousands of border settlers were taken captive in raids conducted by Ottoman or Tatar forces. The fate of the captives was enslavement. Historians generally distinguish between three principal categories. The privately owned slaves were commonly traded on slave markets. The public prisoners who were confined in large state camps, for example in Constantinople, and the galley slaves who served on the Sultan's fleet. Contemporary perceptions of the captive's fate were also strongly shaped by narrative accounts circulating at the time. Among the most influential were those of the Trinitarian Father Pierre Dunne. As you can see on the right-hand side of my slide, Dan displayed a rather vivid imagination when it came to devising Muslim tortures. His colorful descriptions may well have served a practical purpose too, steering his fellow Christians into parting with a few coins for the redemption of captives. How did the Habsburg monarchy respond to this situation? In brief, and setting aside the complexities of the negotiations, Emperor Leopold I, acting with the support of Cardinal Kolonich and the Jesuits, called upon specialized expertise from abroad in 1688. He entrusted the task to the Spanish Discalced Trinitarians, a mendicant order that had long specialized in the redemption of Christian captives. The Ordo Sanctissimae Trinitatis de Redemptione Captivorum was founded in France in 1198 by Juan de Mata and Félix de Valois, afterwards recognized by the Church as mendicant order. In the 16th century, the order was split into a French and a Spanish branch. The latter found his way back to the original simply rules and called himself Discalced Trinitarians, Trinitarians without shoes. To provide a geographical point of reference, a map of the Habsburg monarchy around 1750 has been included. The large yellow territorial complex represents a Habsburg empire, which encompassed, among other regions, my hometown of Freiburg im Breisgau, I'm quite proud of it, and in the 18th century, extensive parts of Italy. Also visible is a vast Ottoman Empire. To the northeast of the Black Sea lies the Crimean Khanate, the primacy destination of Trinitarian redemption missions until around 1740. To the west are the so-called Barbary states, which became the principal target region in the second half of the 18th century. Although formally allied with the Ottoman Empire, these states in practice acted with considerable autonomy. My primary sources, we can only work with archives which survive to the present day, as Walker said. These include, above all, the historiographies of Redemptor Johannes A. Felice in Latin, the rules of the Spanish Discalced Trinitarians, first approved in 1637 and published in 1738 in Latin, as well as various of the redemption catalogs published in German and Latin. I rather like to think of myself as having once been a splendidly accomplished student of Latin. I studied it for all full 9 years, after all. However, before you are carried away by undue admiration, I should confess that artificial intelligence has been lending me a most generous helping hand. My main research interests were which accounting rules exist regarding the redemption, how was the redemption process organized, what were the details of the negotiations, and what were the functions and addressees of the redemption catalogs. Why is it exciting from an accounting history point of view to deal with the redemption of slaves in Europe? We know in accounting history a lot about accounting and religion, the presumed or contradicted sacred-secular divide, and accounting and transatlantic slavery. but less about the completely different context and accounting records about the redemption of slaves by specialized religious orders, as the Trinitarians in our case, or the Macedarians. I like to stress at the beginning the religious imperative of the activity of redemption, as testimonies this quote from the Triumph of Mercy, Triumphus Misericordiae. Who is sold and paid for release in Tartary, Turkey, or Barbary, that which is freed from chains are bodies, but that which is principally redeemed, that which is primarily intended to be freed from captivity, are souls, as animas. On the following slides, I'd like to demonstrate some of the accounting rules I found in the Regula Primitiva et Constitutiones, which comprehends the basic rules and the constitutions, which explain the rules in every detail. Directly in Chapter 1, there's a crucial rule that, based on the idea of the Trinity, the third part of all income is reserved for redemption. The others were for the living of the fathers and for the poor. And that those who have been imprisoned for their faith should be freed to a pretium rationabile, a reasonable price. On this, I show another quote, so that a third part may be deputed for the redemption of captives. The brothers should faithfully render an account to the minister, and the minister to the brothers. It's all in the regulars in chapter 29. And finally, here in the Constitutiones, the explanations. And finally, another book shall be kept for the redemption of captives, in which shall be written not only those things which the convent sets aside for the said redemption, but also all things that are received for it in whatever manner or under whatever title. Afterwards, and concerning all the matters mentioned in this number, the superior and the councillors shall at the end of each month prepare an account, and shall write and sign it in the aforesaid books. Now, should they be negligent in this matter, they shall be severely punished at the discretion of the provincial. Yeah, so the idea is rationem redant, giving an account. They were severely punished, gravita puniantur, and there's also the idea to make it better in the future, aptius in futurum perfectiendum. Okay. And I've also found the stipulation of a triple control principle. It's clear they were fixed on this trinity, always three parts. Yes, 3 months, 3 superiors, triple control. Quite similar to the dual control principle elicited by Quattrone for the Society of Jesus. In each convent and college there shall be a chest with 3 keys for the safeguarding of money. One of the keys shall be held by the superior, and the other 2 by those exercising the office of councillor. And unless all 3 are present, this chest shall never be opened. This slide can only present a highly stylized picture of the organization and conduct of a redemption. At the outset, alms had to be collected, a privilege that had been granted to the Trinitarians by both the Pope and the Emperor. Additional donations also came from members of the Austrian aristocracy. The central figure in the process was the Redemptor himself, who directed the redemption, usually accompanied by associates, and furnished with letters of safe conduct issued by the Emperor. The journey, particularly when the destination was Crimea, was extremely dangerous. The Annales, the historiography, provide numerous examples. After succeeding in liberating some prisoners, while the Annales also recounts the misery endured and the stratagems and schemes employed by Ottoman negotiators, the redeemers had to maintain the first captives who had been freed, as they did not immediately return home. The reason lay obviously in the fixed cost involved. A sufficient number of captives had to be liberated in order to make the return journey worthwhile. Each redemption concluded with a large procession in Vienna or other cities, but always in Vienna. The following slide, taken from the just mentioned history of Dan, may give an impression of this. There were also the children who acted like real actors as angels and all this. It was really a great thing. The next slide, I have some average prices calculated by Pauli on the basis of the redemption catalogs and compare them with the annual wage of a skilled craftsman and with a value assigned to a soldier in the so-called Cartel of Grotkow agreed between the Habsburg monarchy and Prussia. As can be seen, the Trinitarians paid considerable sums, particularly in Algiers and Mascara, that is in the Barbary states. Yeah, it was much cheaper to buy a captive in Tartary or in Constantinople. We will come to this later. Hey, the functions and addresses of the redemption catalogs. The catalogs originally were handwritten justification. There's no example in the archive. And proof of expenditure by the redemptor after 3 months at the latest, to the general definitory. The definitory was an advisory board of the general minister. As we have seen, they should also deliver some information on how to optimize future liberation operations. Later on, they were printed by Leopold Johann Kalivoda, Imperial and Royal Court Councillor and University printer. Kalivoda's printing house, the Officina Kalivodiana, was of exceptional significance and size. The publishing may have served to please previous major donors and foundations and attract potential future donors. And since 1740 under Empress Maria Theresia, as proof of the rightful use of funds for the Habsburgs, who now reduced the church's independence and exerted stricter control over religious organizations. Was the information provided by the catalogs? You see the numbers quite interestingly similar to the inventory presented by Sebastian. There was the first name and the surname, the place of birth, the occupation, age, duration of captivity, place and form of liberation sometimes, if there was a galleys, the ransom amount always, the source of funding as headline, and when it was a foundation or and the type of captivity. It was an ad personam categorization of the redeemed captives. Since 1740, the Trinitarian business model was under siege. There were no more religious wars with the Ottoman Empire. The Tartarian Khanate and Turkey became uninteresting as destinations. Austrian Habsburg had been a Mediterranean power since the War of the Spanish Succession, with the territorial acquisitions in Italy. In addition to Trieste and Fiume and Istria came Milano, Mantova, Parma, Napoli, Sicilia, Sardinia, not all at the same time, but more or less, and as a secundogenitur, Toscana. For the Mediterranean, the piracy of the North African Barbary states, as was the name from the European, was the main danger. The business model of the barbarian states was ransom as a main source of the state income. At the same time, since 1740, under Maria Theresia and then Joseph II, the influence of the Catholic Church in the Habsburg monarchy declined. Enlightened thought undermined the legitimacy of religious orders. Under the influence of the Enlightenment, it was a primary aim of the monarchs to bring the Catholic Church under the control of the state. For example, the influential Jesuit order was banned. I've here an example of the potential awareness of this situation. It's a redemption catalogue from 1763. The dedication was addressed to Isabella of Parma-Bourbon, favorite of Empress Maria Theresa, Archduchess of Austria and Crown Princess of Bohemia and Hungary. Since 1760, even the wife of Archduke Joseph, the son of Maria Theresa. The Redemptor, in my opinion, quite cleverly alludes to a shared French ancestry of the great house of Bourbon, of Isabella, and the founder of the order, Valois. The Trinitarians needed allies in the anti-Catholic climate. Unfortunately, Isabella died in November 1763 at the age of 21. Following earlier closures, a major decree on March 1783 by Joseph II initiated a second wave of dissolutions of orders. Joseph II targeted monastic orders that did not engage in teaching, nursing, or other useful social work, closing approximately 800 houses in Austria and its crown lands. Being the reduced numbers in the catalogues, the redemption of slaves was no more important. The activities of the barbarian states were not so important anymore. The argumentation for the dissolution of the Court Commission for Ecclesiastical Affairs, the Geistliche Hofkommission, founded 1 year earlier in 1782 by Joseph, was a lack of bookkeeping expertise. The clerics of the Trinitarian order, it was claimed, possessed scarcely the requisite expertise in accounting necessary for rigorous bookkeeping accuracy and financial fraud. The order hasn't informed the public about an internal change of its accounting rules to reserve a third part of the revenue for the release of prisoners. It was less, in fact, because the cost of living was too high, and thus deceives the public. By the way, the same argument was employed in Belgium. Belgium was Austrian at this time too. The Broederschap der Allerheiligste Driefoldigkeit of Bruges. Some thoughts for the discussions. First, a small disclaimer before anyone sharpens their cutlasses. My sources present a distinctly Austrian, or if you prefer, European view of slavery and piracy. If one consults Austrian sources, one learns a great deal about how they saw matters, and rather less about the others, namely the Muslims. Let me also reassure you, lest anyone suspect me of geographical bias, that slavery and piracy were by no means the exclusive hobbies of Muslims. The well-known volume Christian Slaves, Muslim Masters by Davis tells only half the story. There were, after all, Muslim slaves were Christian masters, and no shortage was ever of enthusiastic European pirates and corsairs busily plying their trade across the Mediterranean. Having thus salved my conscience and preempted any accusations of partisanships, I shall now proceed. Accounting rules had formed part of the Regula since their first publication. The Regula stipulated precise reporting obligations accompanied by the threat of severe penalties in the event of non-compliance. Similarly to the Jesuits, the Trinitarians applied a principle of triple control in the management of their cash boxes. The redemption catalogs, a sort of inventory accounting, functioned as accounting and accountability devices and employed as also as performance measures, I suppose, and employed an ad personam classification for the redeemed slaves. Where these catalogs were originally only 2 to 3 page handwritten internal reporting instruments, the fact that they were later printed and contained more extensive dedications suggests that the Trinitarians expanded their purpose from purely internal use to include addressees external to the order's immediate stakeholders. According to my current state of knowledge, it cannot be inferred from the sources that there were clear differentiations in the redemption. For example, only Austrians or Catholics. They were even proud. One time mentioned that they redeemed Calvinists and Lutherans, and afterwards they took the right faith, the Catholic ones, obviously. And they mention when they were soldiers. The profession not always was mentioned, but when they were soldiers, yes. That was important for the state, obviously. In some, I found no evidence for the sacred-secular divide. Regarding the literature on accounting and slavery, the accounts of the redeemed slaves were no disciplinary mechanisms to prolong slavery. They were accountability devices for the internal and external stakeholders of the order. The accusation of accounting fraud and insufficient accounting expertise under Joseph may, prima facie, have served merely as a pretext for the dissolution of the order. However, it must also be taken into consideration that the Habsburg monarchy under Joseph was at the forefront of development in accounting. The first chairs of Kabbalistics were established in Vienna in 1752 with Johann Heinrich Gottlob von Justi and afterwards Joseph von Sonnenfels in Prague, in Klagenfurt, and Innsbruck. Foucault talked a lot about it. Moreover, one of the central accusations concerned precisely the divergence between internal and external accountability. Internally, the pragmatic deviation from the rule of thirds had been formally regulated, yet this arrangement had not been communicated to the public or to the state. It was this discrepancy that the auditors, quite rightly, in my opinion, identified as problematic. Thank you so much for your patience, and I'm eager to have some good ideas for the theoretical framework or other ideas. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's absolutely fascinating, the idea of the redemption and the ransoms and the fact that the people were purchased back. I just had a very quick question. I wondered if the slaves were ever exchanged, with perhaps balances being made up for groups of slaves or single slaves, or...
It was both, as there were even arrangements between the Ottoman Empire and the Austrian Empire after the Peace of Karlowitz, and there were also some rules about the exchange rates. Yeah, but and often in the Catholics also mentions that they only give something that but the captive was not redeemed. Yeah.
Nice, interesting, fascinating. Any questions? I'm just quickly checking. So just you can either put your hand up or actually click the button and put your hand up. Either way. Or comments. Some comments, some ideas on theory, as Thomas suggested he might be interested.
I prefer accountability, but I'm not so sure.
You mentioned Foucault. Is that how it's currently?
That was about the cameralistics. He mentioned this as important. That was not the main point. Sebastian?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Yes, another interesting Latin-inspired inspired piece of research. I enjoy the point. Maybe the challenge is to properly understand today the underlying dynamics, I want to say, behind these rules, regulations, together with political intentions resulting from both territorial and economically motivated warfare as well as ideologically and religiously motivated warfare. And this, this is not my period of my historical period of focus and of expertise, but from the general things I understand is that the things have been extremely dynamic and intertwined at the time. And you highlight some of these dynamics in there. Between, goes one way there and another way there, and then there's the third party coming in there. And there's North Africa then popping up as well, and we have the different powers taking different territories all the time, while the Ottoman the Ottoman Empire is striking back. And I think the main challenge will be, in my opinion, to carve this out very clearly and say what is the main argumentative line here of why they were and how they were doing this particular type of trying to get certain people back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, out of this, and what were the traits? So this is the challenge.
In 1740, this situation changed enormously, because at first they were the war with the Ottoman Empire, and afterwards it was no problem anymore. And so the Trinitarians more or less have lost their reason to be there. The problem of piracy was always since the 15th century, the 16th century in the Mediterranean. But for the Austrian Empire before 1740 or before 1720, it was not a problem because it was not part of the empire. Yeah, there was only the Istria and Fiume and Trieste as Austrian cities, but there were and afterwards it was more interesting because Austria was present in Italy, and Italy had for centuries the problem of piracy. Yeah, the Adriatic coast. They always there were raids of those pirates, and the business model of the pirates, of the corsairs, was completely different. With the Ottomans, there was a territorial and a religious war. With the pirates, the corsairs, when they had the privilege of the state, needed money. And you see it also from the prices, they were much higher. It was the main source of income of the states. Yes, the corsairs went home, and a part was given to the leader of this small states, and the rest was for them.
So with this also, this was my question underlying. Is this, do you want to make an argument, a story about the Austrian, the Habsburg state and its behavior, the Trinitarians as a business organization that is adapting in a way? Yeah. Or is it a way of saying, well, look, it's a sort of use a very modern term, a sort of public-private partnership a thing where the Habsburg says, yes, look, we outsource this somehow to the Trinitarians, this thing which we need for political purpose, and the Trinitarians say, oh yes, there's a good business opportunity now, but at one point it dries out because the politics change. What to do now? Can we continue the public-private partnership and exploit the state in another way of this? And I think this is what you need to tease out, synthesize, and organize to carve out a concise historical argument in this, as I said, highly dynamic, convoluted, entangled field. And now Chris takes over.
Oh, various thoughts. I mean, I was really interested in the slide where you quoted from the document about them trying to recover their souls, because in a sense, I wonder whether you can play on the different concepts of redemption, because of course redemption is a central concept of Christianity, and in a sense, this is a sort of form of redemption in the real world. So that was just something that came into my mind. The second point was really possibly a question for Karen as much as for you, Thomas. In the 17th century, the issue of Barbary pilots enslaving people from Britain, and indeed sailing to the south coast of England and capturing people in villages, was a very important issue. And I know that Samuel Pepys visited Tangier quite a bit. I wondered whether, Karen, you'd come across any reference to Barbary pilots in Pepys' diary.
Yeah, you are completely right. And there are different methods, but for example, in Italy, the state was more involved in rescuing, but the English, I'm afraid, they were not so much interested. They didn't, and quite interesting. Afterwards, there was an idea or a challenge for the Trinitarians, because there was, I don't remember who said, oh, it would be much better not to finance North African states, but to finance a fleet. Yes, and so fight against pirates. Yeah, and the Trinitarians explained that it's not a good idea. Yes, and yeah, but you're completely right, and there are also narratives, I suppose, also from one English one famous. I have to look at about the being present in the various bagnios and in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and certainly there was plenty of piracy along the south coast and over to Ireland as well. Probably, I haven't noticed anything in Pepys's diary, but Pepys's relationship and his role in Tangier was after the period, the 10-year period of his diary. So possibly if there's a Tangier, but there are some documents which I keep meaning to go and see at the Greenwich archives that are a slightly different sort of diary by Pepys, but all around Tangier. So that's a whole nother project, Christopher.
Oh, well, good luck with that.
It's wonderful. Any other comments?
Can I just raise one further question for Thomas? One of the ways in which quite a lot of people who'd been captured by the Ottomans or whatever sort of managed to escape captivity was by converting to Islam. Did you have any sort of much evidence of that?
Yeah, and the Trinitarians are quite interesting. The analysis, historiography is until the period of 1730, and so, but it's very detailed. There are 800 pages, and they aimed to rescue souls from people who had the danger, had the risk that they would choose this way, to convert to Islam. And they were very happy when they had the success to reconvert poor souls. Like the Calvinists and Lutherans, it was even in their view worse when they the Christian converted to Islam, and so they it's
and of course Muslims could not enslave other Muslims. So there was a personal gain to be had by converting to Islam in avoiding slavery, I guess. Fabulous. Thank you all so very much for being here. Thank you very much to our three presenters for a wonderful morning.